Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Tan. Hello, everyone. We're going to wait for a few minutes more before we start, okay? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our second seminar of the day. Let me introduce myself. I'm Sula, co-host of this EFX. So now we're gonna continue to our second seminar of the day. Before this, we had Mr. Lai, Dr. IDR Lai, who gave us our seminar. It really have an incredible seminar, and now we will give you another incredible seminar with architect Dr. Tan. But before that, I'm just gonna brief you guys about the background of architect Dr. Tan. Architect Dr. Loke Mun is principal of DrTanLM Architect, director of ArchiCentre and DTLM Design Group. The award-winning architectural studio operate out of Kuala Lumpur, where they are involved in a wide range of projects. Architect Dr. Tan obtained his doctorate from Melbourne University, Australia in studies, social and self-help housing, and he has worked in the most part of urban and rural Australia, Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil. In Malaysia, architect Dr. Tan Architecture embraces and intercepts regionalism in a modern social context. But in rapidly changing world landscape, he believed that well-designed building and spaces create a value in all its users. As such, endorsement to find a balance between the rush towards modern standardization and extra effort and details that can create a requisite ambience for his project. So, without further delay, the pleasure is ours to introduce the next speaker. It's architect Dr. Loke Mun on his topic, Living in the Tropics. Please welcome architect Dr. Tan.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. I'll go straight into my talk. I'll try and share the screen. Can you see the screen? Is it full screen?
It's not full screen yet right now.
Oh, we have the same problem.
Yeah. You want us to help? We can like.
Oh, I just want to try it again.
Okay, I think it's loading right now.
Is it full screen now?
No, it's still not.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and try one more time.
Okay, now it's full screen.
Now it's full screen.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. I've entitled my talk this afternoon as Living in the Tropics. I think I'm becoming more and more aware that the context of where we live in is actually tropical. And the nature of the tropics is that it's hot, humid, wet, and raining all day like today and yesterday. So it's a talk that I'll show you some of the many on my projects, and I hope you can get something out of it. This is a very famous painting by Donald Friend. It's of Sano Beach in Bali, and I think that Bali is, to many of us, we had a lot of our beginnings there in terms of our understanding of the tropics. You can see behind that there's houses, tropical context, and there's the water. There's always the plants, the tropical plants and the gardens around. And you look at the buildings, none of the buildings are very large. they sort of are, for want of a better word, is a pavilion. And of course, you got people that look like Gauguin type of paintings, and you got animal life all around you. I think you are seeing the floods now, and you see monitor lizards coming out. And I don't know if you've seen it on the videos that people are sending around now. So I want to start my this living in the tropics, going back to Bali, I think we spend a lot of time in Bali, and you know, life is a journey, and it's sometimes not what you study in school. It's the places you go to and the people you meet along the way, and these people actually influence you and they change your life. I owe a lot of our background to understanding the tropics to Indonesia, Bali, and this is a very interesting hotel that was one of the first hotels that started the whole hotel movement and the resort movement in Indonesia, Bali, and then later it became known as the Bali style, which later went to Thailand and so on and so forth. And Pita Maha basically means magic light, and this is a river. There's Sungai Ayong in Ubud. It's supposed to be a magical river, and the artist colony came together and they congregated there and they started a small little colony of hotels, and that's how, you know, tropical resorts actually came about. So this is another version of it, because it's become more popular, so there's a new version of it. But I just want to highlight several people that I met along my journey in life. So I think you see the middle top one, you see Jeffrey Bawa. I met Jeffrey Bawa in Sri Lanka when, as part of a very, I had just started my practice and I joined Arcasia and I attended some of these international conferences. And I went to Sri Lanka and met up with him. And he had a great influence in Bali in the sense that he did the first resort development that was also a property development. So today, when you find a lot of property developers talk about resort style, it actually came from this guy, this architect. And you can see a Donald Friend. He was a very good friend of Donald Friend, and they actually did what became known today as Batu Jimba Estate, which was probably the first resort development for sale. And on the right is Kerry Hill. Kerry Hill came in to do, if you look at the middle picture here, the Bali Hyatt Hotel, it was the first hotel in the tropics that did not have an air-conditioned lobby. And it was a huge hotel. It was a Hyatt, and the owners were from Hong Kong, and the designers were PTW out of Hong Kong as well. But the resident architect that built the building was Kerry Hill. And they took a big risk because everyone was saying that you cannot have a lobby for a hotel that does not have air conditioning. And it was not the thing to do, but they took a big risk. They thought they were quite sure it would work. And that's how the Bali Hyatt becomes synonymous with open air lobbies for resort hotels. And you look at the painting, I mentioned to you that it's actually like a villa and it's surrounded by gardens. It's got water, and you find all these elements in it. Along the way, I later got to know another guy. His name was Made Vijaya. He's actually an Australian, and we became very good friends. And we were partners in business for a while. And in 2001, when the Bali bomb happened in Bali and Bali was wiped out for almost a year, his staff are actually from one whole village in Sanur, and he couldn't support his family. I mean, they were like family to him. They were his staff. We actually supported him through that period. So we also have, you know, a good relationship with them. And he came up with this seminal book called Tropical Garden Design. Prior to that, the Balinese gardens were just working yards. There were places where you dried your vegetables and children played in it. There was not a single plant in it except for maybe a frangipani in the corner. And he actually took the courtyard, and you can see it in the picture of the book, and he actually transformed that courtyard into a beautiful oasis. And you find that later when they built hotel villas, you look at the bottom pictures, he introduced the plunge pool, which was just a sexy pool in a villa, and the dining space that looked into gardens with no walls. And of course, the sexy bathrooms where you get into a bathroom and you look out and it's as though you were you know, showering or bathing or in the garden itself. And these three guys literally transform a very simple hut or what we call a wakaf or balai into real luxury. And today, when you go to Amman, you pay like maybe $800 to 1,000 to or even 2,000 US dollars just to stay at night there. So they took a very simple typology from the painting of what was there, and they actually created value out of it. If you look at this Bali Hayat lamp, Made Vijaya just so happened to be the landscape. He was without work. He was actually a tennis coach, and he was writing for the local newspaper. And he needed a job, and he wasn't trained as a landscape architect. He was actually an architect trained in Sydney. And he took on this job because he wanted free breakfast at the hotel. Okay, so while every morning he came for his breakfast, he transformed the gardens, and he introduced this lamp, which became known as the Bali Hayat lamp, and it's still there today, and is replicated in many different forms and look. And that's how you actually take that you innovate from the tropics, and you create value out of it. So this is Made Vijaya's office. If you look on the right, he taught me how to sculpture a tree, how you can take a tree and you can bend the tree and you can create a piece of art out of it. And he taught me about furniture, that furniture can be very, very slim and yet sculptural. And if you look at the middle picture, the tumberger that is growing on top of the hut, and he just took a piece of plywood, and they don't have laser cutting there, and he's got the craftsman to just cut out a pattern. And this pattern that's behind the flower, behind the tumberger flower, is actually the pattern on the shield of a Sulawesi warrior. So he traveled around the tropics and he saw these things, and to him it was a pattern, it was a design. And he took that and he replicated it for new users. So you find in the Alila in Seminyak, you find that this pattern is used in the backdrop of the headrest of the bed. And he introduced the vanishing age pool in the Aman Dari, and I don't have a picture of it, but you can Google it. I have stayed there before, and when you come back late at night, it's pitch black, and sometimes there's a gamelan, there's a pavilion floating at the other end. And when the gamelan players are playing on it, you see the reflection in the water, and you hear gamelan music in the pitch black, darkness, except for a glow of few lights. And you see them like floating on the water. Some people literally screamed and shouted and ran off, but it actually, when you experience it, the sight, the sound, and the visual impression of something floating in the air because it was a reflection on the water glowing, the hairs at the back of your neck really stand up. And that's what architecture and design can actually do for you. So my experience in Indonesia, we've been there for almost 30 years. We went there by chance. We got cheated on a hotel project there in the 1990s. And we lost a lot of money. It was the last money we could afford to lose because it was the Asian financial crisis. And so we decided, since we lost so much money here doing a job that was fake, got cheated by a Singaporean Taiwanese guy, we decided to stay on, and little did we know that it actually influenced us a lot, and we learned so much from it, and we met these people along the way. And these are some of our projects where we start to take the villa and try and transform it into something that developers in Malaysia sort of are looking for in that sense. So these are just an array of our projects, which I won't go into the details, but generally you can see that they are very simple villas. We try to transform them into simple forms, and we try and put it into a green environment. Okay. I'll touch a bit about the tropics, and one of the reasons why in 2009 it was the subprime, another crisis that hit the world, was the subprime crisis in the US and Europe, where property prices were crashing all over the place. And suddenly everyone became aware of that climate change was coming, and it was a big issue. So I just finished my presidency at PAM, and I had developers who came up to me and said that we need a green building. Otherwise, this multinational company will move its headquarters to Singapore. And then I thought, what's a green building? You know, we knew A-class building, we knew smart and intelligent buildings, which only exist in Malaysia. But we never had any rated green buildings. So I set about setting up Green Building Index, and it's actually a tool that is still in use today. So I learned the science behind the tropics. While in Bali, I learned about the romanticism of the tropics and how to deal with it romantically and vernacularly using conventional methods. This was a totally different approach where looking at modern buildings and in a more modern context, I started to understand the science of it, and we actually developed the tool in 6 months and we launched it. And I went from initially was individual buildings, then we went to refurbish old buildings, and we took it even to the step way ahead of Singapore and other countries to do cities, because Malaysia, for some reason, we developed a lot of new cities, and we did a township too. MIID and helped us to develop the ID tool as well. This was a picture that I was at the 50th anniversary of Malaysian independence. I was asked to come up with a picture of what the future Kuala Lumpur should look like, and I put the Twin Towers there right in the background because I'm so glad that today we got the Merdeka 118 and so on, because we must keep moving on. We cannot be stuck in just one building that becomes the symbol of our country. I think those of you who do work in Cambodia, almost every piece of artwork you see on the street or drawn by the local artists there or artisans or craftsmen is of Angkor Wat. And I keep telling the friends that I visit there, I go with some people who are art collectors, and I told them that the greatest epoch of their civilization has become their greatest curse. It has held them down, it's bound them down, and they cannot move forward. They got to get rid of that image of Angkor Wat if they ever want to become, you know, as civilization moves on, they have to become more and more innovative and adaptive, especially to climate change. So I put in this picture flying vehicles, and I had buildings that were like machines, and I had underground transport, which I think all of it will eventually come to pass. I'll just touch on some of my projects now. I hope it's not boring, but I decided to just show you some of our buildings. And then maybe later I'll take questions if there are questions as to why we do the things the way we do. This was a project we master planned in Putri Harbour, about 90 acres. It was a new city center called Nakota. And when I launched it, I actually had the chance to do the sales gallery and information pavilion. And what I wanted was just a billboard on a lawn so that we could project images on it at night, and it becomes actually functional in that sense. The east and west walls are 2 billboards, and then in the middle of it is actually a jewel box. So I wanted a jewel box because when you open a jewel box, inside the important things of life, which are biodiversity, local plant life, etc., etc. So what I did was, you know, when you get an empty canvas, and my clients are pretty trustworthy of me, so I didn't have to do any 3Ds or anything. I just drew this sketch one night after a drinking session, and I just drew this sketch and I just presented it to them, and I gave them 2 options. You could go organic like this, or you could go simple like a jewel box. And in the end, we went for the jewel box, and this is what is in that building itself. So on the 2 sides are actually billboards, because I believe that the future is virtual. It will be projections onto initially it's projections onto a silver screen, which are movies. Then it's projection onto our TV screens, which are LED. But the most powerful one is actually the projection in our retinas. And the image that we process in our retinas is actually more powerful than any other image out there. And it gives us our memory, our experience, and so on. So like the floating pavilion on top of the vanishing age pool, I actually created this to glow at night. I use a polished tile, and we just lit up the trees. I didn't need to light up anything else. And it created these trees as though they were floating and we created the music for it. So they are like, you know, you think that you're in the Everglades because there are sounds of animals and all this, but it is just an amazing experience when you go there and you see these trees literally floating in space. So we had holes and then in the ceiling to let light come in, and we salvaged some kayu arang trees from the vicinity, and then we planted it. So these are just some images of it. That's the drop-off. And I didn't want the canopy, the drop-off, to be sort of attached to the building because it's like a jewel box. So we put a slit of light to actually come through, and that's the idea of the light separating the building. I think a lot of drop-off canopies don't work well because they don't have this slit of light, and the canopy is extremely dark inside. So you don't actually, instead of letting the daylight light up your arrival, it becomes very dark because of the deep veranda. So these are just some of the images. I'll just go through very quickly. These are some of the living, you know, the city buildings that we were doing, and the show units. Okay, so we use this image for all our greeting cards. So we actually put on the projection on it if it's Christmas or if it's Deepavali, etc. Since this is an interior design group, I presume, I'm actually predominantly an architect and master planner, but I always treat my interiors as part of my architecture. So I was asked by a friend to do their interiors for their mansion. It's in Leisure Park City. So I still do a few interiors for friends, and each of these are like my babies. We have big projects in the office, but I do most of the design work in my office, but today I'll show you what I call my babies. Okay, so they are like little things that I do that I'm quite personally involved in. So this, I think some of you know this project building. So this was the 3D that we did. We hardly do any 3Ds, but this one, we managed to do a 3D. So I use Emperado for the floor because I always like a sort of rustic feel. And I went to New York quite a few years ago, and I noticed that they were doing their hotel lobbies in this nice type of Emperado, and the timber was glowing. And they had, you know, I went during a very cold period, and every time I went into each of these hotel lobbies, I thought I was going into an amber chamber. It was glowing. It was glowing orangey, and I thought, wow, I really enjoyed that, and it actually spoke to me a lot. And I try in a lot of my work to try to replicate it, that when you come into a space, you feel that warm glow. So I use a very simple timber screen, and behind is a mirror, and I put these lights up there to sort of float to create a sculpture. Yeah. So the whole of the building is double volume, and it's actually wrapped up with these timber screens. Yeah. And we've been, for interiors, we always work with the staircase, and usually it's very limited budget, but I always find that the staircase is probably the only thing I can play around with that has a vertical element. And so we sort of, in a sense, perfected the suspended stair. In Malaysia, I mean, our engineers, they always tend to over-design the structure from the roof, especially the roof beams. And I find that it's very easy now to just hang a staircase down from the structure without doing too much at the base, without having to hack open or to put a footing there if I was to do a concrete staircase. So a lot of our staircases that we do today, if we are doing a new one, we will always use steel and hang it down. It's a bit like the plants in the jungle, you know, where they're actually supported from the top. Initially, when it grows, it grows from the bottom, but the moment it grabs hold of a tree, it uses tension, and steel is actually very strong in tension. You can never pull a steel bar until it breaks. You can bend it, but you can never pull it until you need really a lot of strength to break it. So we tend to use very slim rods to actually suspend up our staircases, and it actually creates, you know, my only centerpiece that I can usually afford in any of these houses. They are very small renovation jobs, and I basically do it because I like to experiment with it and the sculptural feel of it. So this goes up 3.5 stories, and it's, you know, everyone goes there and just looks at the stair. So maybe your interior designers don't overlook things like that. It could be your only chance to do something great, and there are so many ways to do something amazing in a very small space. Okay, so these are just standard. Yeah. We tend to like very slim and controlled interiors. Our wardrobes are custom made, but we are very particular about the slim edge of the metal. So we actually have a profile that we actually make ourselves. So whenever we get to do one, I sort of repeat it. I'm a bit boring with that. Okay, so this is another job that we did also with very limited budget. It's in Malacca, and it's the restoration of an old rundown building. That was something like that when we first went in, and we're actually doing two for this client. One we are stuck because the party wall moved and the neighbor is suing the owner. Poor thing. So we try to work with whatever we have there to restore it, and the patina on the wall, and etc. etc. And that's the building. Very long. It's about 180 feet deep with 2 air valves. And what we did was we looked around for discarded shutters, restored them a bit, and then we made it into a screen at the back. In the front, you have to follow the streetscape because it's a UNESCO heritage area. But the back, you could actually do anything you wanted. So we always like to do a new intervention into an old space. Some of these, if you look at the neighbors, they just try to replicate the front and the back. But I always find that it looks very funny when you try and do back the same balustrades, but your proportions are wrong, and it just doesn't look right in that sense, keeping the same door and window sizes as the front, but not having the right type of door because you can't get the old, you know, proportions right. And so we decided, stuff it, we'll just put a full screen at the back. Okay, and it's called No Maps. So that's the screen that shields the very simple glass behind. Okay, and that's the reception counter. Inside there were 2 wells which we restored, and we just made it into a feature. During the pandemic, a lot of people threw coins into it, so that was useful to pay for the tea and coffee for the place. Very simple details. This stair detail is we like working with one particular material. We don't like to mix too many materials because in Malaysia, it's very hard to get tradesmen to come in again and again, and each tradesman always damages the work of the other. And then you got to call the other one back to touch up, and you know, it just drags on and on. So we try to use one material that finishes off, and nobody has to come back again. So, but we bend the steel so that it looks like when you hold it, it feels like a piece of timber. And we don't like barriers, we don't like boundaries. So what happens is when the steel rod comes into the ground, we just embed it in so the space looks bigger. We learned all this in Bali because in the villa, when you see things come down, there is no edge. The timber of the villa just vanishes into the garden. There is no curb. In Malaysia, for example, everyone loves a curb. I don't know why they want a curb, but every time there's a curb, it sort of breaks the space. Well, if there's no curb, the boundary just goes over the edge and the space looks much bigger. So these are some of the little tricks we learned while we were foraging and adventuring in the tropics. And you know, to get a staircase like that stiff, because we use very, very thin steel, we actually stagger the rods a bit, but it's not noticeable. So we stagger it by maybe ½ an inch. If you look at it, it's actually not in a straight line. If you put it in a straight line, the balustrade would not be steady. But just by a slight adjustment, it actually, and that's how we also learned this from villas in Indonesia, of how they turn the balustrade at a slight angle and it gives you the stiffness you need. Patina, yeah, that was the same wall I showed you just now, where I just kept it because I thought it looked like a Chinese painting. So, you know, to get somebody back and do a Chinese painting, that would have cost us money, and it's a lovely piece of art. We kept the patina on the walls, and we just on the other side where the rooms are, we kept it white and clean. So it's sort of like a backpacker's place, and the timber from some of the old joists, we actually made it into a table and recycled it, and they get free coffee and tea. So the money they found in the well during the pandemic, they used it to buy, you know, to replenish the common kitchen. Yeah. So the thing is that nowadays, you know, people use it for Instagram and stuff like that, which I think you all understand, but it's kind of weird to me. I think you've seen this house before, so I won't labor too long in it. When I did Green Building Index for Malaysia in 2009, I just so happened to also was doing my own house. And I wanted to test the tool, whether I could actually achieve a platinum rated house. And this began my whole journey of experimentation. Like I said, Bali is about the romanticism of the tropics. You can fall in love with the place. People talk to you about art, music, smell, texture, patterns, you know, but in Asia, a lot of people always talk to you about science and accounts, mathematics of why you can't afford it. But when I did this Green Building Index, I actually went a lot more into the science of it, and I tried to merge what I have, the romanticism in the tropics, as well as the science of a greenhouse. At the same time I was doing this house, Sime Darby was doing an example house also. And I told them, you know, they showed me the design. It was done by a Filipino architect based in Singapore. And he did this very, very odd shape, you know, circular, you know, a lot of curves. And he painted it bright red. And I actually met him quite a few times. We are actually good friends. So he said that it was a new look they wanted. They wanted it to look like a spaceship or a machine because it was green. And I wasn't so sure that that was the right approach. And I used my house to sort of sit it better in the tropics, but yet be totally GBI platinum. And actually that building has since been demolished. And they you know, the new batch of developers who are working there claim not to have any knowledge of it. But my house now is 12 years old and it's still running like a machine. So that's the house from the drone. And I have a very simple white roof. There's a pool in front. I bought this piece of land back because of the 3 large frangipanis in it. And they are still there. So how the house is structured is like the villas that we used to do. We have a big canopy roof, very heavily insulated. I got 8 inches of rock wool, and I got 1 foot of air ventilation in the roof. And whatever is below the roof is actually shielded. I'm actually sitting in my living room now, and the temperature here is 25 degrees. I do not use aircon except for the bedrooms for sleeping, but the temperature in my house is constantly at 25 degrees right through because of the way we insulate the space. And when it comes to late morning, we close all the windows, the sliding doors. We've got cross ventilation, but we shut everything down because it's like a vacuum. And because it's cool inside, if you open all the windows in the tropics, your temperature will be the same outside and inside. So we achieved GBI Platinum. And you see the top diagram was how we do similar to the romanticism of the Bali buildings. You put a big roof over, and then you put the spaces below, and you let it get cross-ventilated. So we are all taught about cross-ventilation in the tropics, but actually you need to be able to control the cross-ventilation. You must be able to shut down. If you don't shut down, the temperature below will be the same as outside. So our house, I have a humidifier, humidity monitor, as well as a temperature monitor. Humidity is hard to control because like now, the humidity out there would be like 80–90% because of the rain, 2 days of rain. But the humidity is impossible to control unless you got air conditioning, but the temperature you can control. So we close down all the walls. The bottom picture is the north-south. All the windows are on the north-south, and east-west, there are hardly any windows. Okay. And I also introduced something from our Vietnam office, which was a skylight tube that works by convection. So what happens is when you park your car in the sun, the temperature in the car can go up maybe 5 to 10 degrees higher than outside. That's why children who are left in the car die in it. This is called the greenhouse effect. When the sun heats up a small space, the temperature inside becomes much hotter than the outside. So these are Lomanco turbines. They're very cheap. They're like 350, 450 each. But they work by convection. If the temperature below it is 3 to 5 degrees difference, it immediately starts to turn. And as it starts to turn, it starts to suck the air through the pipes that I have coming through my building. So what it does is that it creates a passive suction that sucks air through the building. And because it's so cheap to do, my house has 15 of them. And what it does is that it actually, almost to every room, especially the wardrobe areas, there's constantly air movement in it. So you don't find mold or musty smells. Yeah. The roof is a working space. I've got solar panels on it. And the east and west walls, hardly any windows. And on both the walls, I actually put I don't like plants that stick to the wall because they sort of bring the humidity into the building, or they go through the wall. So what I did was I took wires and I strung it up, and and I let the plants actually grow on the outside. So in the early days, we used to grow pumpkin, and you could actually choose the pumpkin that's ripe and cut it down. Yeah, this is a staircase. I won't elaborate too much on it, but these are interior talk. So these are my interiors. My interiors are very much linked to my architecture. I don't do much with it. I just keep it very, very raw and easy to build, and yet it forms the aesthetics of my house. So you can see the pipes that go down to my basement. I like black floors because they sort of create a very surreal fifth dimension or sixth dimension. I had an Italian architect friend who came to my house. He came to visit, and when I brought him into my house, I thought he would look at the garden outside or look at how the house is set up. But the first thing he mentioned to me was, he said that he can see another dimension in your floor. I didn't realize it. Then I looked in the floor, then I noticed I could see all the trees outside on my floor. And then I realized what he meant. And we sat down and had a coffee, and he explained to me that that's why people go to Venice, because Venice at different light, the canals, make the houses or the buildings on the canal look like they're actually floating in space. And especially at night when there are stars and moon, he says that those buildings look like it looks like a city in space, and the water is always black, is it? So I've gone back since a few times to look at it, and I started to appreciate it in a very different light, that actually a reflection can actually create, it's sort of like a sixth dimension that you might not notice it, but your body knows it, and the moment you see it, it actually has an effect on you. Yeah. Okay, so I use a lot of recycled materials. I collect a lot of old stuff. The timber here is, I encourage you all to collect don't be a hoarder. My wife keeps scolding me for hoarding, but I always tell her it's for a project, then it's okay. I collected Chengao timber since I came back to work. So at one time I had a warehouse full of timber, but now I've used up most of it. And now you cannot find them anymore. So, and my house had these old garden chairs. Made Vijaya always told me, every time I saw him, or met up with him, he always complains that it's very hard to find good outdoor furniture for the garden. And unless it's plastic or some sort of carbon fiber or something. And so when I was young, we had four chairs, and our neighbor bought another 4. And that day, when I was moving into my new house, my neighbor threw his garden set out. So I went to salvage it. So I've got 8 of these chairs. So I keep them because nobody makes them anymore. And if you take one of these and ask a steel worker to make it, he wouldn't be bothered, because to bend the steel and to make it into a flowery chair, he'll tell you to go to IKEA and buy something. So this is one of the stairs that I really started experimenting with. And I think the trick with this stair was a bit tougher because it was only suspended. This thing could actually swing left and right. So what I did was I actually have a bit of a thickening there, which you cannot see. And I've got a cross in it, which is a stiffener that links to all the rods. So what it does is that it stiffens it from swinging, because these are all like strings holding up down the stair. Okay. The other thing that I started working a lot with, and in a lot of my interior projects now, is recycled material. Plywood comes 4x8, but normal doors are 3x7. So there's always 1 foot of every piece of ply material that they cut off and throw away. Some of it gets made into chipboard, but a lot of it is just discarded. So I collected a lot of this from my carpenter, and 1 foot is just nice to actually make a shelf. So this shelf comprises of 4 cubicles, and I visited in New York again, Tony Chi. I visited him a couple of times. And each time he moved to a new office because the rentals there keep changing and he's got to move out. And I actually spoke to him about one of these modules that he had. And he said that he feels very sad each time they got beautiful libraries. Because when you do an office, the library is probably the only thing you can actually spend a lot of time and money on. And he said that every time they shifted, they lost the library. And he said that they were trying to find a way to do a library where they could put into the boot of a car and move it to the new building. And so we sat down and we discussed it. And actually, this is something that is like that each of the staff in the office can actually put into a boot of car and take the shelf with them to the new premise. Okay. I won't go into all this, but beginning of early of last year, I added a lot of solar panels to my roof, and now I'm basically net zero. So my house today does not use, we use electricity from TNB, but I generate enough to actually give back to TNB. So I actually don't pay any electricity now. And that's the new solar panels that's gone up. These are other greenhouses, and like I said, I'm just showing you my babies. My brother bought a piece of land and he wanted me to do a renovation. So I do very, very small jobs. The old house was just a bungalow like this in section 14 PJ, but the land was set very far back. So what I did for him was I kept as much, because he only had a budget of something like 400,000 or something. So I actually built a new car porch at the front. I put a villa at the top. So you can see from the plan, I kept the old house and I just built a front portion and linked it up. And I built a long veranda at the back, hoping that one day he'll have enough money. Then he can actually put a glass, sliding glass panels in, and then he gets to enlarge his living room. So that's the villa on top of the car porch. all these are some of my influences, the romanticism of the tropics. I rather, it has to look romantic. And that's the front portion that was built in front of the new old house. And you can see this is the new portion that we put in. The old house is over here. And I built that long veranda coming out into the back garden where I did this downturn, and there's actually, you can put a U channel here and you can actually just add in sliding doors and you get a whole new living room set in the garden. Okay. That's the space there. And I also strengthened the columns so that eventually, you know, if he needed to, he could add an upper floor, which is a master bedroom. And he could put a spiral staircase here and go up to his new villa on the roof, which are all lessons I learned from my Bali days. That you can take a small module, a perfect module, and make it very, very nice. I kept the old banyan tree that was growing over the old toilet. I managed to preserve the toilet. That means when you go in there, you see all the roots, but you can still have a good pee. And yeah, just like that. So this was where the roof had collapsed of the old house. So I just made it into a courtyard, and where the staircase goes up if he ever builds a master bedroom upstairs. Oh. Okay, so that's at night. Oh, that's the master bedroom that I designed for, that could go up. That can be all in glass, and the staircase just goes up from the side and comes into the room. Okay, so this is my office. I think Royce used to work with me. Incredible young guy, and I think he'll do very well. So this is my office at the moment. This is my smaller office, and I use a screen because the sun comes against the building, and I put the screen there to act like a radiator, so the sun doesn't come directly into the building, and it heats up the radiator screen, and the air that flows in between it will cool down the screen. So our office is generally very low energy usage. That's the facade that we have, and that's the surrounding. And these are just some of the green features. I've got a very heavily insulated roof like my house, 8 inches of rock wool. I've got a screen at the front. I've got green wall behind. I've got wind turbines, all from my house, and solar panels on my office, and rainwater harvesting tanks. And that's the office before we moved in fully. Those are rainwater harvesting tanks. That's the heavily insulated ceiling, so the space can actually be used. It's not hard. I've got no problem with leaving the aesthetics kind of raw like that. It's a parsec. That's the roof. We took off the plaster to create a bit of a new aesthetic. The bricks are very nice, light pink, very nice bricks from the old days. These are some of my furniture that I've collected through the years. This is actually a dentist chair, where in India he used to carry, he can pack up and put into this box, and he goes from village to village. Okay, this is a barber chair. Quite kinky stuff. And that's the front facade. That at night, that's how it looks. I want to experiment with a Chanel type window, so I punched this up, and just trying to experiment a bit more with our buildings. This is a house I did for my uncle, and again, it's a very small piece of land, just 5,500 square feet, and this is facing west, and just at the back is east, and the car needs to come in. I couldn't plant trees here to screen the walls, so what I did was I put out mesh. That's the interior. I designed the artwork for the house, so at the back there's a sculpture. I went to look at it that day, it still looks beautiful. I worked with Jin Sung, interior designer on this one. So that's the sculpture that I designed. And I won't tell you what it is. I use evaporative cooling. So from the rainwater harvesting tanks, water actually flows down the nylon ropes, and then it recirculates, and then what happens is when the wind blows through, it brings evaporative cooling through the house. One thing that I didn't realize about mesh material was that how it actually performs like silk. So at night, we just put up the lights, and my uncle actually called me and he said there are people all standing on the hill behind us every evening looking at it. Because when the wind blew, when slight breeze, the thing was sort of dancing in the air, and the mesh material, like silk, has this ability to just almost dance in the air. And this is something I didn't realize, because I've never used this material before. And so it's sort of like a fabric, and it becomes a bit of a performance. Yeah. So the hillside behind is actually the King's Palace. And at night, they turn on the lights from 7 to 10 p.m. And on this hillside, you find all the motorbikes will be parked there, and couples will be up there just looking down at this building. And I thought, it's a very cheap form of, it was this building that actually inspired me to do the billboard in Johor, because in Johor, there's nothing to do. And the whole of Puteri Harbour, there's not a single cinema or something. So I thought we would just show free movies, and people would just come and sit around the white pavilion in the middle of nowhere. So this project actually inspired that little pavilion. And again, this is almost like a jewel box, and everyone always wonders what's inside the thing. It sort of looks like a Faraday ball that there's electricity, moving about, and Frankenstein will come out of it or something. But that's what you can do with your architecture if you get it. But this was not planned for. It was just something that we found along the way. Everyone complains that I only do big houses. So my sister-in-law had a friend who wanted to do a house. It was a single-story terrace house, and actually at the time we were starting to do green terrace houses for our developers. So I used this to experiment with that. And again, I used a suspended stair. If you look at it, it's just sitting on 2 pins to keep it from moving. But the structure is fully suspended from the top. It's always 2 inches above the ground, above the finisher, so it's very easy. Now with the robot, all of us use a Xiaomi iRobot or something to clean now, because there are no more maids in Malaysia. I think I'll need to raise this by 4 inches, but at that point in time, it was 2 inches, so that the robot can actually get underneath it. So the pin is to prevent it from moving, and the load is all held up from the top. So that's the stair again. Yeah. So like I said, there's nothing much I can do with a 20 by 70 terrace house, except to look at how to play with the vertical elements and the daylight that comes through the top. Yeah. So I cut some openings there to go up to the top, so that I could put the turbines at the top to draw the air through the building. This is another house I did in Damansara Heights, and it's got a 100-meter long frontage because it comprised 2 pieces of land. They were going to, I actually designed the children's house here as well, but the children haven't decided to build yet. So I've only built the parents' house. And I always wanted this long veranda because it always reminds me of a resort. And so I got a chance to do a 100-meter long wall and a 100-meter long veranda. So that's the veranda, all from concrete, natural brickwork. And going back to a very traditional sort of pitch roof, as against the flat roof in my house, and creating that villa look while it's still a totally green building. Yeah. The interiors are timber screens. Because plastering is so bad in Malaysia now, I didn't dare to leave the plastered wall, and I don't like wallpaper, sorry. So I didn't want to leave the plastered wall, throw a light on it, and then the client calls me back and says, the wall looks like shit, and makes me get the contractor to keep doing it again, and he'll never get it right. So in a lot of my houses today, I actually put a timber screen in front of it to actually, not see all the blemishes. Of course, if I could leave it raw brick, I would leave it raw brick. Yeah. So that's the house. So these are like a collection of my babies. Again, the staircase. This staircase is at the front, so at night it lights up like a lantern. And so different permutations of it. Okay, I think this is my last one. Then my sister-in-law wanted to do a house, and again, 5,500 square feet. This is the old house, but it had very nice old terracotta tiles. So what I did was I salvaged the tiles, and because they couldn't afford to pay for a screen, and this west, the car comes in this way, I couldn't plant any trees here to screen off the master bedroom on this floor. So what I did was I put up a steel frame, and I used the old tiles, terracotta tiles from the old house, and used it, collected them, got some steel rods in, strung them up like kebabs or satay, and then lifted it up one by one. There's a threaded hole there. So I just get it lifted up, thread it, put a nut through it, and secure the bottom, and then it gets done. So this house, it actually moves in the wind. So the first time the heavy wind, I was quite afraid that the tiles would fly off, but it's now 7 years old, and it's still there. And basically what I managed to do was I asked one of the workers there, Bangladesh guy, who is this guy? And he said that he's the owner. At first I thought it was a king, but he said he was the owner of the factory that made this in India. And it was made like in the 1960s. So in some sense, we actually took a material that was headed to the dump yard, and we managed to give it a new life. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm running out of time, so I'll show you some interiors. I also salvaged this. This outdoor set belongs to me as well. So I collect a lot of stuff, and when I got no place to put it, I chuck it to the houses that I actually built. The earlier house, the big house, there's some of the furniture there's like teak tables, they're also mine. I leave it there until one day I find a place to put it. Yeah. So again, it was very hard to find old outdoor furniture, and I managed to salvage this from a junkyard, and I repainted them, and they got the sofas, the cushions and so on. This is a big piece of teak that I bought in Bali some years back, and I had no place to put it, and I sort of loaned it to them. That's the interiors. I have no problem with jail-like visual or aesthetics because it keeps people away. This is actually the entrance foyer. Nobody has tried to rob them before, because I think when they see this at the entrance, they sort of get reminded you end up in jail. Yeah. That's the interior. Again, very raw. The good thing about doing work for your relatives is they cannot complain. Okay, so I just do what I like. Yeah. So I put a circular opening. I've always been experimenting with this because it adds, it makes the brickwork look very light if you can sort of cut a hole in it, and it makes it a bit more organic rather than as a very heavy aesthetic material. So I use rusted steel and salvage timber for the door. And these doors I bought in a flea market, and I sold it to them. It's beautiful. It comes from Penang. And again, the stair. This stair is a modification. It's a newer version than mine because mine doesn't have a handrail. And I started to realize when my mother came to visit me that you sort of need a handrail because she was holding on to the rods to go up, and I thought, you know, she looked quite helpless trying to climb up. So now in a lot of my staircases, even though it's suspended, I'll put in a string. And this one was a fireman red. Okay, that's that one. And oh, this is the last one. So after I did the wood box, a friend of theirs also owns another big house in the mansions in Park City. And this one, I wanted to continue that amber thing. And I think this is a bit more successful. So I used the cheap plywood, and I just wanted to create this very warm, because all the buildings there are very cold for some reason. And I visited a few friends' houses. They are just like granite floors, and white and gray walls, and I felt it's, you know, it looks like a bank. So I wanted it, when you come into this space, that you sort of always feel that it's like warm. And this one again, I had the chance to work on a staircase, and this one I went all white. And when the lights are off, the stair as a sculpture by itself is quite scary. It's quite eerie. Okay, so that's how it looks. Okay, I think I won't. Okay, that's the stair, you know, at when it's like the stairway to heaven. Okay, I think I'll stop there. Yeah, it's the last house that I just finished. But so thank you very much for listening to my rambling. But these are basically the houses that I do, and I do about 3 houses a year, and I still do them. I've got a wait list of about 2 years, and I'm very selective who I do the houses for. And I think that is a good place to be, to use, to have clients who allow you to experiment and to make mistakes, and yet be able to still trust you to do good design. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Architect Dr. Tan. It's actually really inspiring. And I know that you have experience in Bali, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I have a question for me first. Later, we're gonna continue to next Q&A. Because like every time I go to Bali, I have like more inspiration. I don't know why. I think like because of the culture and also the nature and everything. But because maybe because I live in a city in Jakarta, so every time I go to Bali, I got like, wow. even though like I go to Airbnb, it's already like I don't know, like whole new experience for me. Because now you said that you already have like 30 years of experience, right, in Bali? Yeah, and now you work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then you're now living in KL. If you can choose, which one do you prefer to work? Is it like in Bali or like in KL or like, I don't know, which one you prefer more?
It's a very theoretical question. I like Malaysia because I think there are a lot of challenges here, and I've already found my base here. But I still go back to Bali very often. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I haven't been back for almost 2 years. I go to Bali about 4 or 5 times or even 6 times a year. Because like you said, there's nothing nicer than going out into the paddy fields in Ubud. And
yeah,
I have friends there, so we just sit around a ballet, you know, like a villa, like a little pavilion.
yeah.
And the artists, so they will be painting and they'll be joking with you, telling you mostly dirty jokes. and you just sit there and have a coffee and just, you know, just soak it all in, because the culture, the nature, it is a very unusual place. It is so inspirational. And if you know most of the architects in Singapore, even Thailand, now Vietnam, a lot of them who are very famous today, like Kerry Hill, who's passed away, unfortunately, Woha, Ernesto Bedma, all these guys, they had their beginnings in Bali. They cut their teeth there for some reason. That means they learned some principles while they were there. And I don't know what it is, but you know, you're Indonesian, I take it. There's a line in the sea there. You can Google it. It's called the Wallace Line. And the Wallace Line is between Lombok and Bali.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know.
Yeah. So that line is where Australia starts, or Oceania starts, or Pacific starts. And just before that is the edge of Asia. And the birds that are in Bali, they fly to that line and they turn back. They don't cross that line for some unknown reason. And it's sort of mystical. So in some sense, learned a lot. And also it's about the people I've met along the way, about life's journey. So sometimes it's not, in education, yes, you learn, but sometimes it's not in the paper you get, but it's the people you meet along the way, and they will bless you and open doors for you. That's the journey of a designer. It's a great life.
So if I can conclude, maybe get more experience to everything. I mean, like we can travel and everything to meet people and then see the culture to like get the principle, like, or your own inspiration. I think I can conclude that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
You're right.
Okay.
So get all
So
in.
So now I'm just gonna continue to question and answer to all the audience if you have any question. For those of you who will ask the question, we will give you a UZ candle, palm wax and soy wax scented candle. Sorry. Yeah, we will give you a voucher. So if you guys have any question, you can just raise your hand or like open your mic.
I have a question for Dr. Tan. It's a two-part question. So my first question is, do you believe that could you believe that the advice you should give us for, as we are going to be the future designers or architects, that we should design greener? Should we be greener and design things greener? You said there's a lot of issues with climate changes and how the future will hold. And the second part question is, in my opinion, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like your projects are a blend of industrial and nature in a sense. And when it comes to functionality and aesthetics, there's a lot of problems in balancing it. And through your work, I've seen a balance between functionality and aesthetics when it comes to design. And could you give me an opinion on the balancing of functionality and aesthetics and industrial and nature?
Okay, maybe I'll answer your second question first. I was thinking about this recently in the COVID. I mean, I'm still a young designer comparatively. We are going to practice till I'm 120 years old. I've been publishing a lot of books on tropical architecture, and we're working with Robert Powell and some other people. And I start to realize that the context is very important. We cannot claim that we are in Europe or Japan or somewhere. We are in the tropics. And if we are in the tropics, we need to be sensitive of what the tropics is all about. There is a DNA. There are rules in the tropics. So I give talks about people. You take any graduate today, you throw him in the jungle, he won't survive 2-3 days. But if you take an Orang Asli and you throw him in there, he's so happy. So we are in the tropics, and not to design green is wrong, because that's where all the energy is used to cool your houses, to cool your offices, and it just creates a lot more carbon. So it's actually not the right thing to do if you don't build to the tropics, to the needs of the laws of the tropics. Now, I believe that good design is always emotional. Okay, so that's where the romanticism of Bali comes in. I'm so glad that guy cheated us in 1996 and dragged me to Bali to build a 1,600 room hotel, and which was non-existent. And I'm so glad he dragged me there, because I think God wanted me to go there. And I spent 6 months, going in and out, because we are trying to start the project. I got to know the people, or the people got to know me, because they all realized that I was a very stupid idiot getting cheated, and And because they got to know me and they knew I got cheated, they became very good friends of ours, and they were very kind to us. And so I've developed that area of understanding of tropical design, the romantic part of it, of knowing how to take time off and sit in a little villa in a paddy field watching the ducks walk out to go and eat. And then evening, you can't believe you actually sat there the whole day and watching the ducks coming back to their pen. And it's like the poetry of life. So then at the same time, I also believe that buildings are like machines. And especially the house, because you don't make money from your house. You don't, unless you do A, B, and B. If you don't make money for your house, it's very hard to maintain a house if it's too costly. If your electric bill is 1,000, 2,000 ringgit, you know, when you're a retired person, you will be in big trouble. That's why I put enough solar panels now, so that when I'm not working or disabled, I got no income, I don't have to light a candle to survive. You know, I can still live in the house that I've built, which is a machine, and that's easy to maintain. And maybe just to cite you an example, the romantic part of it, I did a house very early on, which I didn't show. I used to buy houses, do them up and sell them. I put the swimming pool right in the courtyard, and there was no room to walk around the pool because all the rooms were opening directly to it. And I was the one doing the maintenance of a pool until I sold it. And it was a bugger of a thing to maintain. I literally had to wear my swimming trunks to get into the other end to vacuum it, you know. And I thought, this is a stupid design. And I was the designer. So now when I do a pool, even though if I want it to look like the room vanishes into it, I will make sure that I'm able to walk all around the pool to maintain it. So these are some of the things that I guess the romantic notion of it has to be linked to a very practical aspect of a machine, that it needs to be openable, serviceable, and able to be operated. Yeah. We are very practical architects. Most of my staff are even more practical than me. I'm the one who take the risk with being romantic. And I think it should be a balance. Because if you just do machine type, you know, buildings, you just keep coming up with these flats that don't work. Easy to build, but don't work. And then in the end, after 30 years, they get knocked down. I think we should build things that are, you know, that can withstand climate change and last a longer time. So I think I basically answered both your questions. Whether green is right, green is definitely the way to go ahead in the future.
Thank you so much for your input. Would you recommend houses, landed, or apartments, in your opinion, if in the future we were to design, or the future of, you know, the people?
Okay, you're talking about densification. Now, there are two schools of thought. There are people who believe that to save the environment, you got to densify. That means you live in smaller areas to free up more land for agriculture, for farming, and for animal life. So they believe in tight, compact, tall, dense cities. Then there are the others who believe that any city bigger than a village becomes a monster. That means we should be a whole series of villages, and the distance between one village to the next should be, you can cycle from one village to the other village, and it all becomes self-sustainable. I grew up with both the schools of thought. Okay, so you know, Eco City was basically, I wrote a paper called Eco City for the Rio Summit in 1990, and it was a proposal that cities should not get bigger than a certain size, and there should be a whole series of cities, just like, you know, like Robin Hood days. You got Nottingham, you got, you know, all those like the old days. They are like little villages. So then the internet came out and made it possible, because they called it a global village, thinking that technology will actually keep us in villages, and sustainable little villages. Then when I started practicing, I started to realize that all the infrastructure, the expensive infrastructure that cities build, you must have people to use them. So there were a lot of cities that people were moving out to the suburbs, and then the city was dying. Then I felt that that was also wrong. So we want to bring people back to populate the cities. So if you populate the cities, the businesses there need a certain critical mass, otherwise it cannot survive. So now we try and pack the densities back in to use the infrastructure. So I have prescribed to both schools of thought. I haven't decided which is correct. I basically, we are all in the Klang Valley. We are in the city, and we don't see it as much as the mega cities like Bangkok or Singapore, or Ho Chi Minh, where they got like 18 million people. But they are quite amazing to be able to function that way and yet be very compact. Tokyo, Osaka. So I think because of population growth, it will inevitably need to be dense, compact, but livable. The village one, if you could, like Malaysia, because our population is small, you could still achieve that. So we'll see how technology, which direction it drives us to. I don't have the answer. I prescribe to both schools of thought.
No, it was an answer that I was looking for. Some input on both sides. It has pros and cons for both sides.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah.
Okay, next, does anyone have any more question? I think Mr. Rizwan have questions. Should I just I'm just gonna read it. What do you think about social innovation design? Have you ever encountered such projects?
Okay, I think, are you meaning community engagement or people participatory design or
wait,
what?
I'm not sure.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Community engagement, yes.
Okay, interestingly, my PhD is on self-help housing, and I'm supposed to be an expert in people participatory design and working with the communities. We still do some of it, and we just picked up a new job with the Orang Asli, and they asked me to design their houses, but I told them I need to sit down with them, otherwise it'll be wrong. So to me, that's very important. I think the government doesn't prescribe to that because they give you, like, they want 15,000 poor houses built in a year, and these developers just churn them out and they don't care what, I don't even know where the brief comes from, that it's got to be like 900 square feet, 3 bedrooms. It might not even fit the demography of the needs of people. So in short, to answer you, I'm a full believer in people participation and community engagement.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Razwan?
Yes. Because I'm quite sort of floating at the moment, because if talking about design, architecture, and the rest of the other graphic design and fashion design have already talk and do social innovation design for such a long time, but I'm still find it hard to digest that interior design have not really go big about it. Is it because of the client or something like that? So I was just looking for some answers from here. All right.
Okay, next.
I think Thailand is very advanced in that.
Yeah,
but
I know.
For some reason, the Thais have very good sense of proportion, scale, and beauty. If you ask any rich man here, you don't want their opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next, does anyone have another question? Maybe we can take about 1 or 2 more questions for this session. Maybe while we're waiting, I have another question there actually. Because you experience a lot of design and a lot of things begins your journey and your projects, how do you deliver that to the contractor that actually made the projects? Because like if you have like misunderstanding or miscommunication, it could be affect to the project, right? Like, do you have any like specific tips to find a good contractor, or do you just have like your guy, you know? So because we're a new designer here, so like I think we need that tips.
I think it very much depends what type of work you do, but you always need good contractors. So I work with, especially for my smaller projects, I work with a certain group of people, and I think we have worked so many years together that it's become like second nature. It's very, very easy to interpret. So yes, I work with craftsmen and I work with a certain set of contractors for my smaller jobs. For the bigger jobs, we tender it out, but even then, they are still almost the same group that sort of does the quality that we want. Yeah. You need them.
Sorry.
you need to have the people who can actually do the job.
Okay. So like, because I think like it's kind of like hard to find that, you know, because like sometimes our brain have a lot of ideas what to do, and like when we deliver that inspiration or creativity to the contractor, they made it the wrong way and it doesn't really deliver good, you know. Like I think, yeah.
I'm very old school. I always believe you must draw it. I have interior designers in my office who only likes to meet with the contractors and tell them what to do, but they never produce a single drawing. So I always say, where's the drawing? Where's the drawing? Where's the drawing? So if you cannot sketch it out or draw it out, you will always come out wrong.
Okay.
I'm very, very old school on that. And I draw up all my details. Yeah. Especially the important ones that are critical to your building.
Okay, I think we can take one more question. What is your principle when it comes to being a designer?
Okay, so what is my principle? Okay, so maybe I'll answer in 2 ways.
Okay.
My principle is I try not to work for unappreciative clients. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have some projects where the clients, after a while, they think they know more than us, or they control the design. Then we don't resign from the job, but I just pass it to another director, or I just pass it to the draftsman until they sack us. But they don't usually sack us. So I pass it to another director, or I pass it to a draftsman or another architect. So that's my principle. I'm quite particular who I work with now.
You can pass to me, Doc.
You don't want them, bro. I'm you know, I can tahan quite a lot of people. Those I cannot tahan, you don't want them. But in terms of architecture, you know, I asked, since Lai is here, is going to pressure me. So I've coming more and more to define my architecture as tropical and green, because I'm starting to understand that I can't run away from the tropics. When you are young, you think that you are multinational, you know, firm. That means you are Russia, Dubai, Middle East, and all. But in the end, you find out you are an expert where you are. So I don't claim to be anything more than that.
Okay. Does the IDR Lai have any question? Maybe.
No.
The last one.
Oh, actually, I don't have a question, but I have a affirmation. When I grow up, I want to be like you, Doc.
Get lost lah.
I have a question for both of our guest speakers today. As I did internship, I feel that, you know, to understand the industry more and more, and sometimes meeting up with the clients, it's a difficult job when you are designing. They like IDR Lai said that, you know, the artistic sense that you want to portray towards the clients are, you know, underappreciated, or not, they are not cooperative, or do they want it in a certain way. How do you have any advice on how to deal with that in a situation, or yeah.
Like, you're the answer.
Well, I guess the same thing I've shared earlier, right? Whether they want to hire us as a painter or they hire us as an artist. That's normally I will sometimes I pause during that moment. I keep quiet by not responding to any of the requests, and that sort of gave them a message that we are not aligned on the purpose. Indirectly, that also sent a signal to the client, like, okay, I don't get any feedback, response, or reaction from Blue Water. Maybe they are not agreeable, or he has sort of stopped contributing ideas to the overall development. I think it's the same as what Doc have just mentioned. He passed it to the draftsmen and whatnot, but we will continue with the job, but with less input. We kind of take 2 steps back and let it go, let the project goes on. Otherwise, it'll be quite difficult journey moving forward, because it's not easy to resign from a job. It's very tedious. So we try to avoid that as much as we can. But yeah, it's a process of educating the client. It's, again, why are they hiring us? So they have to be very clear that you come to us because we are able to produce something and add value to your product or your project, and not your painter. So that's how we normally deal with that.
Maybe I'll add a bit. I think when we are not aligned, or they give feedback that you know, trashes our direction, I usually same like Lai, I actually reassess whether I've actually missed something or I made a mistake. I think what we don't want to become is like a prima donna who even when he's wrong, he thinks he's right. I think when you get to that kind of stage, you should retire. But as a professional, we always need to, when somebody tells us, I think that's wrong, and then you know, don't take it personally, just reassess. And sometimes we have got things wrong before, because we, like, for example, I was doing an army project recently, and I designed them a nice Tuscany village. And then later, I'm surprised none of them laughed when I did the presentation. And one of them took me aside and guided me in the afternoon. He said that it's not a recreational village. Every day they are doing training, you know, they don't have time to rest. Whereas I was doing them this nice Tuscany village, you know, because it was built on the hills. And I went to see the site. I said, this looked like Tuscany. And the romantic part of me overtook the practical side of it. And I didn't understand what the army was on about. They wake up at a certain time, they go marching, they do drills. That's actually, they don't want a Tuscany village. They want a regimented camp. You know, and I thought, wow, what a fool I was. But how nice of them, all the big boys there, that they didn't laugh at my presentation. And I was so convincing, I almost convinced myself. I think that's where, you know, sometimes your client tells you, Doc, when you start believing your own bullshit, it's time to retire. So always look back at yourself, whether you missed something, but if you are totally right and you think that's the right way to go about it, then stand your ground. Then the next step comes in.
Okay, thank you, Architect Dr. Tan and Idea Live for the answer. I think that's what we're looking for. And now I'm just gonna close this seminar. But for those of you who already asked the question, our colleague will message you personally to give you the voucher of Yuzu scented candle. So thank you very much, Architect Dr. Tan, for your amazing seminar. I hope like we can get more experience like you, go travel and everything. I guess that's it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Lai.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, well done. I'm inspired.
Okay.
We would like to take a snap with Dr. Tan and Mr. Lai for memory. So to those who have their camera on, please, and we will take a snapshot. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Is that all? Okay. On the count of three, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Leon.
Thank you so much.
Sula,
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Tan.
Caroline.
Thank you.